My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds or geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic multiverses, mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope. Last week on the show, we mentioned we were going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog and the new movie for Sonic the Hedgehog, but some scheduling issues came up, and we weren't able to get together to record. And so we're going to spend this week's episode talking about nerd and geek culture from 2013. And then next week, we'll review Sonic the Hedgehog.
And we're back to talk about 2013, the unlucky year.
Oh, boo.
Yeah, I tried.
So this year, it's so hard talking about different years every week. I feel like I am actually living in these separate years. I don't know about you.
Not quite.
You still feel firmly planted in living in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to wear my glasses anymore. I got 20/20 vision.
Hey, that's funny. So yes, 2013. We always seem to start talking about how we were doing personally at the time. 2013 was the interesting year of my life where I spent most of the year working co-op jobs. I worked one job in a small town called Port Hope for the winter months. I did summer school during the summer, which if you ever have the opportunity, if you're in university and you have the opportunity to do summer school full time, do it, because it's just so much. There's so fewer people on campus. Professors are more relaxed, and you go through the material in a more condensed way. I can't speak highly enough of summer school.
I mean, I went to a university that had my biggest class was 13 people, so it wouldn't make that much of a difference.
That's fair. And then I spent the fall working a job where I drove around in a smart car, counting parking spaces and parking lots. So,
wow, that is
it was
staggering.
It was the city's parking studies unit. Okay, it was pretty fancy stuff.
2013. I think 2013 is the year I moved out.
Hey, welcome to the...
Mostly because my family moved everywhere else. Yeah, it is, because that's the year my brother graduated from high school, and therefore the year that my older sister moved with her husband to Victoria. My younger brother moved to Alberta, and my parents moved to Seattle, and I moved out because, well, my parents moved, so my sister and I moved into an apartment together, and we watched a lot of movies together, so... that was good. That was good.
Yeah, I got a car for the first time in 2013, now that I think about it.
There you go.
And I started
living... smart car?
The smart car was a company car. And I also started living in community in 2013. I was living in a house with 5 other guys, and you were one of them, but not in 2013, so we won't talk about that yet. All that to say, 2013 was an interesting year for me, but it was probably even more interesting for nerd and geek culture. Wouldn't you agree, Beef Pork Ribs?
Yes.
You were very hesitant there, which means that...
Your year wasn't very interesting, so I shouldn't have been that hesitant.
All right, here we go. So starting out with video games from 2013. This year, my list of top-selling games comes from the Fiscal Times.
I like it. Hey, there's slightly less sequels this time?
Yes.
There were a lot last time.
That's right.
They were all sequels last time.
Yeah. I think so. So starting out 10th most... best-selling video game, BioShock Infinite, which I'm guessing is a sequel to BioShock.
I can't remember if it was an actual sequel or a remastered version. I honestly can't remember.
I've only ever heard of BioShock. What is it? What kind of game is it?
I have watched people, like my brother's played BioShock, and I watched him play through most of the campaign. It's a steampunk alternate history game that kind of plays halfway between a third-person shooter, an RPG, and a puzzle game. It's a lot of like kind of, you are somewhat investigating, but in a world that is dangerous enough that you have to defend yourself, and it's definitely got like an underwater steampunk aesthetic to it. Things that work on like pumps and some electric energy, but mostly steam. I mean, it's a very good universe building game. The choice as to the time period it was placed in is like around I believe it's an alternate 1930s, as well as like kind of everything that was built around it was built very concisely. So it was a cool game.
All right, I'll give it a Thin Stations Bat Cookie.
I'll give it a Bat Cookie. I feel like it did well.
9th best-selling game, Monster Hunter 4.
Okay. Are you at all familiar with the Monster Hunter?
I'm guessing you hunt monsters.
Yeah.
Is it a Japanese game?
It's a JRPG, yes. And you hunt monsters, and like they leave things behind that you can use to upgrade yourself. And I've never played it, but I've seen people who, I don't know about specifically 4, but I know enough people. Like like all JRPGs, it has a pretty strong following from certain people, and it's a fun open world-ish kind of thing. So yeah, I'll give it a thin Bat Cookie. I've heard good things about it.
I'll give it a little Bat Noogie. Not a full Noogie, maybe like a half Noogie. Like you only Noogie half their head.
Yeah, like you only have like 2 knuckles actually rubbing.
Yes.
But
yeah.
Okay.
8th best-selling game, Tomb Raider.
I mean, this technically is a sequel.
It's more of a remake or a reboot.
Remake. Yeah.
I remember living with a guy who played through this game, and I watched him. It was fun to watch someone play this game. It felt like a more, I guess, realistic take on the concept of Tomb Raider.
Yeah. It was very cinematic too, like the game. I also remember watching some people play it. Let's Players, actually. I did that kind of thing. But yeah, it was nice to see that they didn't just go in to cash on Lara Croft's character design, but actually put an effort into the game, not just like updating her graphics. So I think that's worth the consideration.
Yeah, I think this game deserves some praise because the movie that came out 2 years ago now definitely took a lot of inspiration from this game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think I haven't seen the movie, so it's probably not very good. But
it's a video game movie.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So I mean,
but Tomb Raider gets a Bat Cookie from me. It revitalized, and it's like it is hard sometimes, especially to like go from older console games where it was very limited what you could do, and to reinvent it with the new capacities of what can be done in video games these days. It's sometimes you'll hit a lot of games where they'll appear very simplistic for the time of the remake, but I think that they bypass that by making it a legitimate adventure game just based around the same kind of concept and character.
The 7th best-selling video game, Animal Crossing: New Leaf. I have never played Animal Crossing.
I haven't played Animal Crossing either, but you know how Farmville became a thing?
Yes.
Before there was Farmville, before you had your phone, your game on your phone, there was Animal Crossing.
Yeah, no,
I'm
sure I understand
the appeal of it.
Yeah,
for certain people, I just never. Yeah,
this gets a thin Bat Noogie for me.
I'll give it because it's not the first one. I'll give it a thin Bat Noogie.
6th best-selling game of 2013, The Last of Us.
I've definitely heard of this game, but I can't recall what it actually is.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I did not play it, but again, ironically, a different guy. I was living with both of these guys, but this guy who played The Last of Us, he wasn't really a person who played video games, but he really got into the story of The Last of Us. And it's one of these post-apocalypse kind of settings, and you basically follow this older guy and a teenage girl essentially traveling through the world trying to survive.
Oh, all right.
And
yeah.
it was praised, among other things, because they actually had actors do motion capture performances for the video game.
Yes, I recall.
All the cutscenes looked super realistic, and you could tell these actors were actually acting, like the sprites actually looked like people, which was very innovative at the time, as I recall. And yeah, they've been talking about a Last of Us movie for a long time. It just hasn't actually gone anywhere. And it has a very cinematic, it's one of these like, kind of solo platforming. I know, no, that's not the right word. It's not open world either, but it's a single player campaign.
It's an RPG.
Yeah, role-playing game. So it has a really great story to it, and it's one of those ones you could easily just watch the cutscenes for on YouTube and have a really good time with.
And those are always good. A good experience, but doesn't always translate well to movie. Oh, yeah, bad cookie for that. It's because I know people are still talking about The Last of Us and talking about it well. Like, it hasn't aged super poorly.
Yeah, bad cookie for me as well. The 5th best-selling video game of 2013, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag.
Arr! I love the fact that they made an Assassin's Creed that's a pirate game.
Yeah,
I don't remember it doing particularly well, but I do remember being like, yes, Assassin's Creed is pirates and muskets. And,
well, it's quite impressive considering the third one just came out the year previous that they pumped out the fourth one so fast.
Yeah.
I remember this one being marketed through San Diego's Comic-Con. They had a big giant ship that people could like jump into and
parkour on the ship.
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, it's impressive that these games not only are coming out so fast, but that they also are like, selling as well as they do. And I do believe the pirate gimmick that the fourth one brought seemed to make it popular and stand out.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I'll give it a bad cookie because it was cool. But at the same time, it did feel like this was a gimmick. It was like, we've run out of things we can do with this franchise well, so let's make it pirate-themed, and people will like it.
Yeah, so I'll give it a Thin Stations bad cookie.
Yeah.
The 4th best-selling video game, or I should say video games, these are two separate things. Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. It's interesting they kind of lump those together as one game, but it's basically the same game, only there's minor differences.
Yeah, if anybody's never played a Pokemon game before, they usually release in 2 or 3s. And the different versions are essentially exactly the same game, except there are different Pokemons in the same region that are exclusive to one game or to the other. The more they do them, the more there are slight differences. But the basic difference is, the kind of Pokemons you can catch or the rarity of certain Pokemon in a different game, which it started with the first Pokemon game when link cables were a new kind of invention. So like trading with somebody else who had the game was something extraordinary, and Nintendo wanted to bank on that. And they're like, well, you need to have both red version and blue version in order to be able to catch all the Pokemons in the game. So you have to trade with people, which is also a good way to sell your link cables when your best-selling game does that. And so it is essentially the same game. It's just very slight variations. And so it makes sense that they're lumped together because, yeah.
So I've only ever played Pokemon Silver. So I have no idea what makes X and Y. Like, was there any new feat? Do you follow Pokemon at all?
Not enough to know, but generally speaking, every new game has a new region they go, which tends to follow the Pokemon Adventures TV shows.
I wonder if this is when they started doing the Mega Evolutions or the.
I believe it is actually
the Digivolving, because it just seems like a ripoff of Digimon.
I mean, yeah, it kind of is. I was never a big fan of anything that came out. Actually, yeah, Crystal version, which is like the third version of Silver, Gold, and Crystal, were all the same game, is the one I like the most. I think it peaked there, and every other Pokemon after Gen 2 is, well, I won't say trash, but is, to me, superfluous.
So there we go. I mean, I'm my brother Dan Hatton has kept up with Pokemon. I'm sure he would say good things about this if he was here. So in his honor, I will give Pokemon X and Y a thin back cookie.
I'm going to actually give it a bat noogie, partially because like there are some that I remember coming out and it being a big deal. This was not one of them.
And we kind of failed to mention this when we were talking about 2012, but the Wii U came out in late 2012. So I mean, it kind of says something about how that console did. The fact that none of the this would have been the first full year that the console would have been available. And it doesn't seem like any of the games that would have been available for that console sold really well, or were in the top selling list here. Maybe the Animal Crossing was a Wii U title.
Animal Crossing was definitely a Wii U.
Okay, so it got one in the top 10.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The Wii U did not do as well though as like the Switch is doing. I feel like, and
Yeah, it definitely did not.
But I feel but it was very much a prototype for it. Having the controller have its own screen and be a console. But I feel like it was very much an in between thing because like the Wii had like motion control, was very new, had a lot of things that were very innovative, and the Switch is a console and a portable, like it's both a portable console and a full gaming console at once. It's amazing that they did that. But the Wii U was kind of this weird in between where I think they were kind of like figuring out what they can and can't do. The only game that really benefited from it, as far as I can remember, was the Legend of Zelda game that came out for it. But other than that, it was pretty meh.
Third best-selling game of the year was FIFA 14. So this might be a more global list because there are no football or basketball games on this list. This is the only sports title on this list.
Yeah, and it makes sense that globally soccer is much more popular than football or basketball.
So good on you, FIFA. I'll give you a bat noogie.
I'll give you a bat noogie too. I gave a cookie, I believe, to 2012 one, which was a World Cup year, so I'm allowed to do that.
In second place, second highest grossing or second best-selling game, Call of Duty Ghosts.
Think that was Black Ops 3? I'm not sure.
I'm looking this up because I'm like, how the heck do they have all these sub...
See, Call of Duty Ghosts was actually a different universe in which the Ghostbusters joined the army and fought against the forces of evil. I would actually play that game if that was the case, but unfortunately, no, it isn't.
All right, let me see. In Call of Duty Ghosts, the story is mostly told through the eyes of one single character, Logan Walker. Players assume the role of Logan for most of the game, while several other playable characters, blah, blah, blah.
He's a ghost walker. He's a walker.
All new option, as Riley, the first non-human playable character. What? Blah, blah, blah. I guess it says here it was received well for praising its multiplayer gameplay and introduction to the new game mode Extinction, but criticizing it for its single-player campaign, rehashing of familiar concepts, general lack of innovation, and storyline ending.
So it had a good multiplayer, and that's why it did well. Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, I see. Riley's a German Shepherd. So Riley was a playable character, and he was a dog.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay. I mean,
And Extinction's a 4-player co-op mode, which pits the player against various types of aliens. Okay,
so it's like a different version of zombie.
Yes.
Mode, which definitely did do very well, so who knows.
Okay, here we go. Story. In 2017, blah, 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 the Ghost and Elite Coalition of all U.S. Special Forces first appeared. Federation of Americas, yada, yada. Okay, so it's not about the paranormal, unfortunately, but it seems that they moved away from zombies to including aliens, so...
Oh, how very inclusive. Still a bat nuggie.
Yeah, I mean, we had to give credit to Call of Duty for continuously showing up in these top 10 lists for top selling video games. And even though this one, I guess, wasn't one of the better ones, it's still, and you know what's weird? By this point, you think if a game was going to be bad, people wouldn't buy it because there's websites that are reviewing these things and YouTubers and Twitchers.
But also there is this thing where Call of Duty, because it has kind of a global fan base, tend to still sell all of their games at least once to them, and because it is across all consoles that it's made, and for PC as well, it does kind of hit more people. Whereas a lot of, like, if you looked at, like, I believe for the previous year there was a Halo game. Halo's Xbox exclusive, well, Xbox and PC exclusive, right? And you know, a lot of other video games might be released mostly just for one console. I mean, I don't know if it came out for the Wii U or the Wii, but, like, it comes out for multiple consoles, and it is kind of a mainstream game, and so it does still manage to sell well.
So Bat Noogie for sure.
Yeah.
And the top-selling video game of 2013, the first year in this series, this retrospective we've been doing, that is not a Call of Duty title, Grand Theft Auto 5. Now,
I mean, Okay, it's not Call of Duty, but it's Grand Theft Auto, so it's not much better.
Yeah,
It's,
so I remember this making a lot of news when it came out, and like people were kind of upset about the fact that it's like, what does it say about us as a society when like the most popular video game is one where you essentially are criminals that can do all kinds of, among carjacking, murder, like all these kind of things.
It's because it's a video game in which you can be a criminal and do all the things that you would never actually do in real life.
Yeah, so this actually like brings up a philosophical question, because since you're a philosopher, I can ask you this. I once heard someone say that part of why these violent video games where you're shooting people and committing crimes do so well is because we as humans have this like desire to do evil, and playing the video game is essentially an outlet for you to release all of these urges or these desires you have to do bad. What do you think about that?
You're aware of the movies The Purge?
I've seen part of one, yeah. Is that based on the same idea?
You don't actually know. The basic concept of the Purge movies is that once a year you can commit crimes with no consequences for 24 hours.
Right, yeah, I know that much.
Okay, well, that's basically the same argument that's being made, but for video games, like saying if you give the opportunity to commit crimes, people will. And there is an aspect of it. I don't think it's a fundamental evilness within people, but it is definitely something. There is something about the feeling of power, and I think that Grand Theft Auto 5, what people kind of overlook is that it's not just shooting, like mowing down people and getting hookers and all those things. Yes, you can do these things, but more often than not, what it really is the power to be able to do anything in an open world. There's a lot of other games, like fantasy games, that have large open worlds and very few rules that work well. And one of the things that the Grand Theft Auto franchise, especially since San Andreas has had, is that there are tons of mods. You can do anything you want, not just illegal things. You can literally do pretty much anything you want. You can go pick up a helicopter and fly it around if you want to. You could. It's one of the reasons that why games, I believe, like Goat Simulator were a thing that became popular, because it's like, you're a goat and you can go do whatever you want, except you're a goat. Well, Grand Theft Auto isn't so much about committing crimes, but about the ability to do anything, because you can go around in Grand Theft Auto and just drive around for fun, listening to the radio. It's a completely legitimate way to enjoy that game. Or then, start hitting some pedestrian and be like, haha, I gotta start. Okay, I'm gonna stop now and just keep going. I don't think it's necessarily has to do with the willingness to do evil, but rather with the willingness to do whatever you want, regardless of consequences. And I think that that's something like, especially in the mods, it's like there's always going to be a mod for these games where you can fly. People want to fly. They want to fly in a game that's open. Like it's really, I think, more about the lack of restriction this game puts on choices. They just happen to be criminal ones. There happens to be the option of criminal ones, but I don't think that's what's important. The fact that they're criminal is not what's important. It's the fact that you have a choice to do whatever you want in the game.
All right, well, this has been 4 years in a row now where a game where you're essentially, like, a major part of it is killing people is the most popular, best-selling video game. So we'll see if that trend continues as we go through the rest of the decade. Last time when we were talking about video games, you made a point of saying indie games are kind of being left off this list. So I have here top 5 indie games of 2013.
All right.
You can tell me if you've heard of these. Proteus.
Nope.
Kentucky Route Zero.
No.
The Stanley Parable.
Yes, that was a great game. My gosh, the Stanley Parable was an amazing game.
Bat Cookie.
Oh yeah, Bat Cookie. It's hard to describe without spoiling things, but basically you follow a yellow line, while something is being narrated to you.
Gone Home. No,
I don't know that one. I've heard. I think I might. It's ring a bell, but I can't remember.
And according to this website, Forbes, Papers, Please.
All right, I only knew one of those, but it was worth mentioning because it made a lot of noise, and like it was. I feel like these days there's a lot of games that like kind of happen, and then suddenly everybody, especially because YouTube, Let's Players are a thing, everybody played it for a little while, and then they got over it. But it was definitely a very interesting game. All
right, so moving on now to TV shows from 2013. I was very excited when I looked at the most watched TV shows in this year because
Yes.
once again, I had to find a different website because it doesn't seem like there's one website that logs these things every year.
But hey, exciting things there.
Yeah. So I mean, when we talk about the most watched TV shows, only 2 of them are, well, actually 3 of them are repeaters from previous things. But so there is some new blood in here. So
Yeah.
the 5th most watched TV show in 2013 was The Blacklist, which was a new show that year, which is something I've never heard of before. I have heard of it. I know James Spader's in it.
I haven't heard of it.
Oh, no? James Spader's the main character, but that's all I know.
Okay.
With that being said, I can't really judge it. I'll give it a Sensations Bat Cookie.
Sure. Why not?
NCIS Los Angeles.
Still a bat noogie.
Oh, what? It moved up from, it was in 6th place last year, and this year it's in 4th place. I enjoy it whenever I watch it. It's fun.
Fair enough.
Robin and LL Cool J doing their thing. Bat Cookie. And then surprisingly, for the first time, because I know this show started in like 2007 or 2008, but all of a sudden in 2013, The Big Bang Theory crashed its way into the top 5 most watched shows. And I know that this show went on for like 12 or 13 years, and it was, I'm guessing this must be the point where it started to essentially pile its way into the list of most watched TV shows. I can't remember how far into the show it was when it showed up here.
Yeah.
But I did watch most of The Big Bang Theory.
But I do remember The Big Bang Theory was always a bigger thing than people thought it was going to be when it came out, right? Like, it did gain a lot of popularity very fast. And, yeah, it is kind of surprising if it started in 2007 that it took 6 years for it to get there. I was never a huge fan. Like, I watch it and I liked parts of it, but there's also part of it that I was like, I felt like they recycled a lot of material.
Yeah, I think this might have been the point where like Amy showed up as a character.
Oh, that's possible.
And she certainly added a whole nother dynamic to the show for at least Sheldon's character and for the rest of the cast.
Yeah.
And you started to see more of like the girls. It wasn't just Penny, that there was Bernadette and Amy, and they had like their own kind of side things going on. We've spoken about the show before here, and my big thing is that they really paint the main characters like nerds and geeks of everything, which
nobody is that specialized in that many things.
Yeah. So it's that's unrealistic, and sometimes their jokes are just making a bunch of pop culture references, and it's like, if that's funny, then I should be the funniest person on the planet because like everything I say is a pop culture reference.
Yeah, I think also like they kind of had this thing where it's like they have a bowling night every week, but they also have a Halo night every week and a D&D night every week and a World of Warcraft. There aren't enough days in the week for them to do all of these activities every week.
Yeah.
Like maybe once a month.
But I'll give it a Bat Cookie.
I'll give it a thin Bat Cookie. It wasn't like, I don't really genuinely enjoy it anymore, but I did at the time. So Bat Cookie for the time.
And Sunday Night Football is actually in 2nd place this year, so it's been in a battle with American Idol this decade between being the most watched or second most watched show. So Sunday Night Football, at least from our American perspective, is clearly popular. Bat Noogie for me.
Oh, yeah.
But surprisingly, for the first time this decade, a dramatized television series was the most watched TV show. But it's a show we've talked about every week, every year. NCIS became the most watched TV show in 2013, which you don't see American Idol or Dancing with the Stars on this list for this year. So I know those shows continued. So this is probably the breaking point where they just dropped off and became less popular. So I say, yay, good.
I've actually, once we get to the end of a show that ended, I'll start talking about my general theory of kind of this year, the last year, and possibly the next year.
I got to give NCIS props. I can't believe that it like gradually climbed from the start of the decade to this point where it was the highest.
Maybe one day, for the sake of this, I'll watch an episode, but doubtfully.
Oh, but Mark Harmon, man, he played Superman once in an animated movie. Is that not a reason? Ducky has played Alfred a couple times in animated movies. David
For those
McCallum.
listening at home, I'm giving vacant looks to Average Joe.
David McCallum was on some of the Ben 10s. Come on. All right, fine. NCIS still gets a Bat Cookie for me.
Noogie.
Looking at TV shows that started in 2013, we have The Leftovers. Are you familiar with this one?
No.
So this is a show by Damon Lindelof, who was one of the showrunners, creators of Lost.
Ah.
And
Yeah.
it's a show that went on for about 4 years, and from what I understand, it's like there's been something like the rapture that has happened, and essentially this is about all the people who are left behind.
Okay.
So Avengers Endgame kind of like, in a way,
Ish.
is kind of like this. I've never actually watched The Leftovers, but I'm told in very Damon Lindelof style, like a lot like Lost, there's a lot of mysteries, and they intentionally don't explain things, and then even when the show ended, there still were unresolved mysteries, and yeah,
There is only a certain level of that works. And I think that it only works if it is possible to solve all the mysteries. Like, a great example, Gravity Falls had tons of codes everywhere among it and hints about things that would be happening. But it was possible to piece together the answers, even if they weren't answered. It'd take a lot of work, but it was a possibility, and that's what made it kind of really popular. Was like, oh my gosh, Matt Pat, for those who don't know, he's like the game theorist, who also had started doing like, movies and TV shows. Adored that TV show because it had tons of like theories to test out, but that were being proven in universe. So if you want to do that, you kind of have to give people something.
Bat Noogie for me.
Maybe.
The Crazy Ones started and ended in 2013. Are you familiar with this show?
No.
It's a kind of like I saw it about 2 years after it had finished airing. It's a TV series starring Robin Williams and Sarah Michelle Gellar. They're like a father-daughter duo who run a marketing company.
I like both those actors,
Yeah, so
but not always.
the sad part of this show is that Robin Williams committed to do it because he was in so much debt from all his divorces and whatnot and his recovery. And this is basically the last thing he did before he passed away.
That is sad.
And, watching the show, it is kind of funny because like every week they're trying to essentially like come up with a marketing scheme for like whoever their client is. And it's called The Crazy Ones because they're all kind of a little off. They're all really weird. Like imagine if like the cast of like The Office were trying to come up with marketing campaigns for people. Only it's Robin Williams who is like extra zany.
Yeah.
And you can kind of feel watching that he's like trying too hard. That he's like, I gotta be Robin Williams. And yeah, I enjoyed it when I watched it like years after he passed, but it is kind of sad.
I'll give it a bad cookie on the basis that I might actually watch a few episodes.
Yeah, a bad cookie. I enjoyed it. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started in 2013. When they announced this show and they started showing like trailers for it, I was really excited because Coulson was one of my favorite parts of the MCU. And it was sad when he died in the Avengers. And so when I was like, yeah, like it's going to show us the ground level experience of the MCU and Coulson's going to be around, and they kind of promised or teased at least that Avengers or movie characters would show up. And so I watched the first couple episodes and it was dull. And I've tried over the years to jump into the show at different points. I understand you can tell with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like that they did not it was developed separately from the movies, because why on earth would you introduce a whole show about S.H.I.E.L.D. and then halfway through your first season have a movie come out where S.H.I.E.L.D. is destroyed?
Yeah.
So
that's a thing that happened.
And like the show had to kind of react to that and like write out their whole series around the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. fell, and there was the whole splinter with Hydra. I tried jumping into the show at several times and just couldn't stick with it.
I've never watched it, but for what it represents, which was the beginning of TV shows that were linked to movies, which is something that is becoming very big these days, I think I can afford to give it a bad cookie for what it became.
Yeah, well, the frustrating part is that as time went on, it became more and more divorced from the movies. And aside from Peggy Carter show up in a flashback and Lady Sif showing up in one episode or two episodes, it really was separate from the movies. So I give it a bat nuggie. I'm sure it has fans, but...
9-9!
Brooklyn 9-9! 9-9!
I thought it was more recent than that, but...
No, it started in 2013, and
yeah, fair enough.
I only discovered it, I think, like I heard people talk about it and there were references and whatever. I finally decided to watch it in 2018, and I kind of like slowly made my way through the first 4 seasons or 5 seasons, and then it was canceled and it wasn't. And
Yeah, that was a roller coaster. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the following years, but
yeah, it's a great show.
yeah, Bat Cookie.
Bat Cookie.
The Blacklist we talked about already.
The 100 started in 2013. Have you heard of this show?
No, I have not.
It's another one of these. It's another CW show that's like
okay.
It's like these sci-fi thing. I've seen like one episode. I don't remember what it's about, but I'm giving it a Bat Noogie.
All right. Well, if it's forgettable, Bat Noogie.
House of Cards. So this is the beginning of like prestige television for streaming, because when they announced House of Cards and it was starring Kevin Spacey, it was like the first time that a streaming show had kind of gotten a big movie star to commit to being in their property. And so from what I recall, House of Cards was really the first Netflix original that was popular.
And it was. Have you watched it?
I've seen the first episode.
I've watched the first 2 seasons, and I will admit it was amazing. I know there's kind of like now there's a big stigma on it because Kevin Spacey got canceled through it. And everybody's like, well, he shouldn't be in the show. But let's be honest, it's like when they got rid of Charlie Sheen for 2.5 Men. Yes, it was needed, and he was being unreasonable, but like the show suffered immensely as a result.
Yes,
and like he was carrying that show, and that it was like Bat Cookie on that show. It was a great show, but it was definitely problematic.
Yeah, I mean, 2013 was probably when I was first really watching Netflix and discovering older shows that were on there, and occasionally checking out their original properties. And you know, it's like I say, House of Cards represents a shift in television, really, because it was the first time that high quality, well produced, well acclaimed TV shows are being produced for streaming services instead of regular television.
Yeah.
And I can remember seeing advertisements for
House of Cards
on TV, basically saying on Netflix. So it certainly is noteworthy in that respect.
I mean, by 2013, I'd stopped watching TV because I wasn't living at home anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. Shows that ended in 2013, we have 24.
Wow.
Which I didn't realize it went on for that long.
I didn't either, but that's pretty big.
I never really watched it.
No, I didn't watch it either, but I know enough about it. Like it's a big deal that it ended. And
Sensation's Bat Cookie.
Yeah, why not?
Psych ended in 2013.
Yeah, there's a Bat Cookie there. I think we talked about it when it started. I think in 2010 or something like that.
I think one of the years we've talked about so far was like on a most watched list or something.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. How I Met Your Mother ended in 2013. Now this is a show.
I mean, that show gets a Bat Cookie, but not the ending. Oh God.
Yeah,
I actually do distinctly remember the week that finale came out, and people talked about it, and I decided not to watch it, and I haven't since. But I know exactly what happens, and I'm not gonna watch it because it's awful.
Yeah, I've watched the show occasionally, never followed it, and when I did eventually hear how it ended, I was like, really? That's how it ends?
Yeah, the last episode is the only episode I haven't seen at least twice, but I've watched the entire show twice over, except for the last episode, which I've never seen. It
feels like the kind of show that really outran its premise.
There is that, but there is also the idea that because they wanted one of the reasons they couldn't really change the way it was going to end is because they had like the kids pre-recorded, because they didn't want to re-record the kids year after year as the show went on, because they would visibly get much older, like the kids on the couch listening to the stories. So apparently a lot of the reaction shots were filmed like several years before the end of the show, and so they kind of like had screwed themselves into having to have this end the way it was going to end, even though it went against massive amounts of character development that had happened in the last 2 to 3 seasons, especially for Barney's character. It was awful.
So
Bat Noogie for the ending, Bat Cookie for the show.
I give it all a Bat Noogie. Send me your hate mail. True Blood ended in 2013.
I feel like we talked about the beginning of it too.
I don't think we have yet. I don't think it ever.
No, it was Blue Blood, not True Blood.
Yes.
Never mind. Oh, right. That's the vampire one.
Yeah, this is the vampire show.
Okay, yeah.
So this is kind of like where the end of the vampire craze is ending, because I remember like this and Twilight were kind of coming into existence at the same time.
Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, like there was a vampire resurgence, and I feel like this is towards the end of that. This was vampires for adults because it was sexy.
Sexy vampires.
Yeah. I never watched it.
I didn't either. I honestly, there's only one big vampire franchise that I've ever really liked, and it's the anime Hellsing, and it needs to be taken with a large grain of salt. So that's how I feel about vampires. However, I did want to bring back something I know I talked to you about like how this I mentioned it or when we did 2012. This is like the end of television, and you kind of laughed at it, but I think what you said about House of Cards kind of illustrates what I was talking about, that a lot of these really big, the last of the really big TV shows are starting to end, like The Office. Even though it became more popular on Netflix, it was still pretty popular while it was running. And I think it's the same thing with like Breaking Bad, which had ended in 2012, and a lot of like big names were ending and were starting to get replaced by Netflix and streaming shows and originals. And I think that's why like this is going to be interesting going forward for TV, because this is definitely when the time of transition started happening, which is something I wasn't necessarily fully conscious at the time, but like I am seeing it now. And a lot of these shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine became very popular on Netflix rather than on its airing. And I think we're kind of getting into that era where streaming services make TV show popular, which is more or less where we are completely now, whereas like almost nothing airs on TV anymore or is popular that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, maybe we'll have to find a way to account for streaming shows on
heavily in
the future.
Yeah.
Moving on to anime from 2013.
Ooh, I like some of these. I like a lot of this, actually.
So 2013 was really the first time I actually started watching anime that wasn't just Dragon Ball Z or kind of like super mainstream stuff. I remember starting to get into shows that were really like, they seemed like really new ideas to me, but the more I've learned about anime, it's like, oh yeah, this is very typical for... Like I watched a show...
I know the feeling.
I watched a show that year called A Certain Scientific Railgun, and I thought, wow, this is super cool and like things I've never seen before, and then I find out it's like a spin-off of another series.
A Certain Magical Index?
Yeah, which is like part of a whole... Anyway.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 of the... I only know about this because it's like, whenever you look at anime lists, like in alphabetical order, it's like a certain something are always like near the top of it.
So this is when I was really starting to get into anime for the first time. I was not quite at the point where I was actually willing to watch a show with subtitles. I was still very much, if I'm going to watch anime...
You're still weak.
I got to watch it in English. So having said that, a lot of the top-rated animes from 2013 were like random stuff I'd never heard of before, so I kind of admittedly circumvented the list to include shows that I at least knew the names of. So I think 2013 was probably a more like...
I should have seen this list, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's all right.
Again, from my anime list, we'll start with number 7, Magi, The Kingdom of Magic.
Magi is a good series, and it's also the spin-off of Sinbad. Both great. Kind of... Like, I find that they teeter that line of being a little bit mainstream, like, this is what you expect anime to look like, but they were very, strong enough that it still worked, especially because this is, like, in the wake of, like, Bleach and Naruto coming towards an end or being done, and, like, a lot more shows started, like, and a lot more manga started being made into anime, and a lot more series started not lasting as long. And I think it's kind of Magi is where Magi and Fairy Tail kind of represents this shift of shonen away from very long running series to like kind of medium running series that kind of play out their popularity and then disappear.
Yeah, I've only seen like pictures of this. It seems like it's a lot of like fantasy stuff, like Aladdin and whatever.
Yeah,
and
it's
Sinbad, but
it's
as anime.
Quite good, actually.
Yeah,
I would recommend watching it. I give it a big bad cookie. I read the manga almost in its entirety, and it is excellent. It does get very big eventually, but it has good characters.
All right, I'll give it a bad cookie. Why not? The 6th most best rated anime,
Chihaya Furu.
Chihaya Furu Season 2.
I don't know what Chihaya Furu is.
It's about a girl who plays a game called Karata, which is like some kind of game involving like taking cards off a table, like a space in front of you. It just it's good. I've never seen it.
I'll give it a bat noogie.
Yeah, Bat Noogie, why not? The 5th best rated anime of 2013, Kingdom Season 2.
I talked about Kingdom in our 2012 thing because I was talking about how it was terrible that certain shows were CG'd. But in the second season of Kingdom, they went away from having everybody CG'd all the time, and they started actually doing like hand-drawn and 2D animation for like dialogue between characters, but kept the CGI for like grand battles, which was really good.
So this is a show about China?
So it is a show about the first unification of China, which led to the Qin dynasty.
So it's Japanese people telling stories about Chinese people.
It's like if you ever played any of the Romance of the Three Dynasty Warriors games that are based on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a Chinese historical period, but it's very popular in Japan. It's like pseudo historical. It kind of like there's a lot, and most of the characters in it are historical figure from that time period in China, but they all have like Japaneseified Chinese names, which is really weird, but it's a thing. Because somebody like I can't remember them for this, but like I know that for Dynasty Warriors, the character Cao Cao is Soso in Chinese, but then in Japanese it became Cao Cao because I don't know. It's a weird thing, but anyway,
So is Kingdom a bat cookie or a bat noogie?
Oh, Kingdom is a bat cookie. It's good.
I don't really
enjoy
those.
It got better after like when they started doing the shift in animation. It's still. I haven't watched the anime completely, but the manga is amazing.
Yeah, this doesn't sound like my cup of tea. Bat noogie.
Fair.
The 4th highest rated anime of 2013, Shinjeki no Kyojin, or as it's known over here. Yeah, I'm flexing with my knowledge of Japanese titles. Attack on Titan. Now, this is probably one of like the big phenomenon anime of the decade. Where when it was coming out, like it was like on everyone's radar, and like even before I'd seen the show, like people were going, like I was going to conventions and seeing people dress up as the characters, and this was actually the first show I remember because they put it on Netflix. It was probably the first time I actually I got over myself and watched an anime with the subtitles because I couldn't wait. I was so curious. I didn't want to wait for the English version to be available. So I remember actually watching the show with subtitles because I wanted to see what all the fuss was about.
I have an extremely unpopular opinion that Attack on Titan is completely overrated. I'm not saying it's bad, but it was definitely, I did not think it lived up to the hype.
I mean, that first theme song.
Oh,
so epic.
Yeah. No, there are great things about it, but it's not like there have been other animes later on or more recently that have done things that have had that kind of a hype level that I think were worth it. Like One Punch Man got all the hype, but it deserved all the hype. It's an amazing show. Attack on Titan was like all the hype, and it lived up to part of it. But I think I was also biased because I was still, at the time, I was still watching older series, and I was still like into the classics and still watching Hunter x Hunter at the time. And I felt like this series was decent. But it was like one of those like it's the best thing out right now, other than One Piece. But it might have been, but because I wasn't so much aware of other things coming out, I didn't think it was that great.
Yeah, having read all of the manga for Attack on Titan, which is a rare thing for me to say.
Yeah,
it just gets gradually worse as time goes on.
I think also the show had massive pacing issues that the manga didn't have at first, but then now does.
Yeah, and they waited way too long to get the sequel.
Yeah, also
of the anime out. So,
but because I now know this, it's basically ripping off Claymore, which was a pretty decent show.
But anyway, season 1 of Attack on Titan, which is what we're talking about right now,
I'm giving it a soft noogie because I didn't really like it, but I could see myself giving it a sensation bat cookie.
I'm giving a full-on bat cookie.
Yeah, fair enough.
The 3rd top-rated anime of 2013.
Yeah, we talked about Kuroko no Basket.
Kuroko's Basketball Season 2. People love their boys playing basketball, so...
I don't remember what the difference was with Season 2, so I'm going to say bat noogie. But
yeah, bat noogie for me,
watch
too.
the abridged series, it's good.
The second most top-rated anime of the year, Hajime no Ippo The Fighting.
Yeah.
So this is a boxing anime?
Yes, Hajime no Ippo is a very long running manga that has kind of been divided into different... I don't want to say season because it's literally like they made an anime for like the first couple of arcs and then it went on a hiatus for a few years and then they did another series and like The Fighting has some of the very good matches. It has, I believe, Takamura's second like world title bout. It follows mostly Ippo, who's the main character, who's this kid who used to get bullied and then started boxing and joins this boxing gym. But there's also at the boxing gym a few other boxers who are characters who are followed. I think that the anime definitely covers what makes the manga great. The sound mixing is amazing, and the guy who writes this like owns a boxing gym at this point. He's been heavily involved in the professional boxing scene of Japan for a number of years. He's been writing this series since like the 80s. It is very realistic, and it is done with love and dedication to the sport and to its history, and it shows in the show. But also what I really like about it is that it actually, the parts between the fights are just as good. Like Hajime no Ippo is one of my favorite slice of life anime because the parts between the fights are very good slice of life with some training montages in it. And it works out really well that way. It's a big old bat cookie for me. It's a great series. I would recommend all iterations of it to anybody.
All right.
Also my favorite sport anime ever.
Okay, that's enough to get my bat cookie. And disappointingly for me, at least, the top-rated anime of 2013 is Monogatari series second season. This is based on a light novel where one guy encounters all these different girls who have different supernatural problems with them. Like, there's like a snail girl and...
okay. For a second, I thought you were going to say it's The World Only God Knows.
No, I mean, that... Anyway.
That is a good series.
It's this one here. If you look at the picture, does any of that look familiar to you?
Not even remotely.
There's like a little vampire girl and a werewolf girl, and it's
a harem anime.
It's kind of... I've watched this show, and like my roommate will like walk in and see me watching random episodes, and it's so weird. Like the editing's weird. It's like it'll go from like an extreme close to someone's eye to like something abstract or like a far away shot of the people talking to each other, and it's.
There are shows who can get away with that, but it has to be done with a purpose.
Yeah, and maybe I just don't get it, but this show seems really random with the way it does this stuff.
Have you ever watched Fulikuli?
No. Okay. I know what that is though.
Okay, because that is a show that has really weird editing, but it's also. It's for the purpose of the show. It's also based on a like online manga, which did a lot of really weird things in it too.
Anyway, this gets a bat noogie from me.
I'll give it a bat noogie too. It doesn't sound great.
Some other notable shows from this year: Kill la Kill became a huge. That was like its own little mini.
Yep.
I never really got into it.
Really,
it seemed a little too out there for me, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's Madhouse. It's good. Like, it's good animation. The concept's a little weird, but like it's a good show. It's solid. I would say I'd give it a bat cookie. Bat
noogie for me. Silver Spoon, which I understand is a series from the creator of Full Metal Alchemist, except it's about people living in like a farm in like a rural town, which I think is just hilarious that a person who did like this big old fantasy series is like, and now a show about people living on a farm.
Yeah, but sometimes that happens. I mean. Yeah, authors sometimes just change what they do very drastically.
I think it's great. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard good things about it. The World God Only Knows, you mentioned this. It had its Goddesses arc this year.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, the World God Only Knows is about a video gamer who's really good at these dating sims, these dating simulator games. And so the show is about him essentially exorcising demons from girls by romancing them, using the skills he's learned as a video gamer.
Basically, there's these little demons in their hearts that are causing their hearts to be emptied, and he has to fill their hearts with love to exorcise them. It's as stupid as it sounds.
Yeah, and
it's amazing.
But what makes the third season interesting is that in the first two seasons of the show, whenever he like romanced a girl, she'd forget everything about the encounter. And so he could start over as if with like the next story arc with a different girl, and there were no like hard feelings. But in this season, they do retain their memories. So as it goes on and he starts doing more and more of his like conquests, he has to kind of tiptoe around these other female characters which
honestly makes the series even funnier.
Yeah, like it's super entertaining.
Like, it is a strange and slightly unnerving concept, but it is done in a way that is definitely more funny and lighthearted than actual. I think mostly because I feel like the series would be completely different and probably very bad if the character wanted to do this and like took pride in it, really. But he's literally like, he is a total nerd, and he's like, okay, let's hope that what I did in video games still applies in real life, because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, Bat Cookie for sure.
Oh yeah, Bat Cookie.
Log Horizon started in 2013.
A better version of Sword Art Online.
I love Log Horizon. It's a better version of Sword Art Online. It's about people who get stuck in a video game, and instead of trying to get out, they just say, all right, this is our life now, so how do we survive in this world, and how do the economics and politics and how do the cultures work?
Whereas Sword Art Online was always about getting out of the game, and that was the ultimate goal, which kind of took away from the fact that it wasn't a video game. Log Horizon just embraces the setting very well. And yeah, it makes for some great things. Like, who would control a video game? Like, which players would be in charge of a video game world, and why, and like what led to that?
Even the way they interact with like the non-player characters, that's like a whole fascinating thing.
Although Overlord is the better one for that.
Yes, but big Bat Cookie for Log Horizon, and I hear it's getting its 3rd season later this year, so I'm very excited about that. And then the last anime show we should mention is Devil. The Devil is a part-timer, which is available on.
I'm only mentioning it because it's one of your favorites.
It's funny.
It is funny.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's one of those shows that unfortunately only ever got 1 season of anime. So if you want to like see how the story ends or continues, you got to go read the original light novels. But it's super funny. Basically, like a devil character finds himself in our world with no powers, and so he decides he's going to get a job at McDonald's and rise the corporate ladder, and he starts to just start caring about being a good McDonald's employee. It's not called McDonald's, it's a McDonald's stand-in.
Yeah, it's like McGoggle or something like that.
Yeah, McRonald's, I think. And there's a hero character who just like, can't believe the fact that the Demon Lord wants to just be a good guy, so she's like spying on him all the time, and it's fun. It's super funny. Bat Cookie.
Yeah, why not? It's cute. It's a thinner Bat Cookie from me than from you, though. But I also don't like Slice of Life as much as you do.
Oh, I love it. Some anime movies that came out this year. Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods came out in 2013.
Yes. We watched that together.
Yes, we did.
You invited me over and we watched it together.
Yes, so basically the restarting of Dragon Ball Z, there's been constant new Dragon Ball Z animation through Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Super since this point, and it was a great movie, did a lot of good things. Bat Cookie.
It is the reason Dragon Ball Super exists.
Yeah, Bat Cookie.
Yeah, Bat Cookie. It was a good movie.
The Tale of Princess Kaguya. I've heard of this one. It was nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Movie, but I never saw
Ghibli?
it. I don't think it is. Anyway,
I've never heard of it.
Must be at least decent. Thensation Bat Cookie.
Sure, why not?
The Wind Rises. I think this one's.
That is a Studio Ghibli. That is quite a good one, actually.
I have not seen it. So
I mean, all Studio Ghibli movies have a certain like level of quality to them, but this one also had kind of a stronger story because it was more based around historical events, specifically in wartime, and that kind of made it both more interesting and also like I've always found it fascinating seeing things from different points of view, especially when you talk about wars and when there is this kind of general consensus that the people who win the war end up writing history, and it's only much later that you can start adding things of people who did live through the war and how they lived through it. And I think that that's one of the things that makes this movie great, is it's about the way that somebody lived through the war, but somebody who ended up ultimately being on the losing side of it. And
okay.
But also the losing side obviously tends to get victimized, not victimized, but tends to be polarized as people who were hateful, and remembering that, there were normal humans,
So
on
Bat Cookie?
the wrong side. Yeah, it's a Bat Cookie.
All right, sounds good.
Unless I'm mistaking it with another movie, which is possible. But I'm pretty
And
sure
Garden of Words came out in 2013.
Garden of Words.
This is a Makoto Shinkai movie.
Okay.
He's an anime director most famous for Your Name, which I'm sure we'll talk about when that year comes along.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. But anyway, this is an earlier film of his that
It was cute.
I have yet to see, but I've heard good things about. It's about sad, lonely people developing a connection with each other through a garden. It's,
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds like enough of a
Sounds cute.
Sensations Bat Cookie.
All right. On the basis that Your Name is absolutely adorable, I'll give it that too.
And so finally, talking about movies that were released in 2013.
Ah, yes.
Directly from Box Office Mojo, here are the top 5 grossing films from 2013. In 5th place, we have Monsters University.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see it. And
Neither
to be
did
honest,
I.
I didn't care to.
I thought it was a dumb idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't
Monsters Inc. was a good movie. You didn't need to
Well, I would have loved to see a sequel to Monsters Inc.
maybe, but even there, I felt that Monsters Inc. held its own very well, but also that there are a lot of questions about universe building that I might have been interested in. Where they did their post-secondary studies was not in that list.
Yeah, so Bat Noogie for me.
Bat Noogie.
4th place, we have Man of Steel, which is admittedly a very polarizing movie for people.
Yeah.
When it came out, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a different, everything, basically every Superman thing after the Christopher Reeve movies was basically just we'll just continue in the same vein. So even Smallville borrowed so much of the visual elements and the music and everything from the Christopher Reeve movies, is saying this is the Superman way.
This is what Superman is now.
Yeah, and so one thing I appreciate about Man of Steel is it said,
It is the way.
It said, well, then we're gonna do something different for once. And so Krypton looked different, the music was different, the suit looked different, and they, it's not a perfect movie.
What's that symbol stand for?
You don't like that part?
No, it was awful.
I thought it was fun to actually see Superman fight somebody, but just the way it just didn't work out perfectly.
And it wasn't. It was a decent movie with terrible things in it, I think, is the main thing. It wasn't a horrible movie in of itself.
Yeah, they tried to really address some of the...
Yeah, but some of it was... But some parts of them were just kind of bad. And again, it's hard to reboot the Superman mythos again, which is one of the things that happens with Batman all the time. Because there's been a lot of Batman movies, they kind of have to reboot or reconfigure it every time they make a new one. And that's problematic. And I think that there definitely was parts of that.
Yeah, and I don't think they intended for this to be the starting point for their shared movie universe, because it just doesn't feel like there was a plan made out. Whereas with Iron Man, you knew that was meant to be the start of a larger universe.
I think also Iron Man was feeling it out.
Yeah.
Whereas Man of Steel didn't feel it out, but then was still included in it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the problem, is there was no attempt at it instead of just a half-hearted potential attempt.
Having said that, I did enjoy it, so Bat Cookie.
I'll give it a thin Bat Cookie. I found that some parts, overall it was a decent movie, but some parts of it were incredibly dumb.
In 3rd place, we have Despicable Me 2.
I don't like Despicable Me for a number of reasons.
Because it destroyed Megamind.
That's the main one, and I've talked about that. But also I have to admit the second one was actually a good sequel.
That's the one that
And it worked
introduces
out
his
well.
girlfriend, as played by Kristen Wiig.
And
Lucy.
it wasn't awful.
But it gave them the idea to make the Minions movie, so that's bad.
That was awful, but I think on its own merit, it can get a Bat Cookie. But
Yeah, it was
the last one that was decent.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, I'll give it a thin station Bat Cookie. In 2nd place, we have The Hunger Games: Catching Fire.
Yeah, Bat Noogie. I don't know what else to say about it.
I mean, it's ranked higher than the one was from last year,
But it made less money.
Yes, that is a good point.
So it wasn't contending with the same kind of things.
That's also, it's a good point. Bat Noogie for me. I'm sorry, people who want us to talk more about the Hunger Games, but it's just not an interest.
If you want us to talk in depth about the Hunger Games, we'll put it in the bat jar, and I promise I'll watch them to talk about it.
There you go. So the highest grossing film of 2013 which is also the highest-grossing Christmas film of all time, because it is a Christmas movie, Iron Man 3.
How is it a Christmas movie?
It's set during Christmas. It's a C-type Christmas movie. Because it's directed by Shane Black, and Shane Black doesn't know how to make a movie that isn't set around Christmas. We've spoken on the podcast before about Iron Man 3.
That's the one where people blow up, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It did tremendously well compared to the first two Iron Man movies, and you can tell it made over $1 billion globally, and you can tell that it was riding the coattails of the Avengers. Everyone was on a high from the Avengers, and were like, "Oh, the next MCU movie, I gotta go see it."
I mean, it wasn't terribly disappointing.
There's one element of it that's incredibly disappointing with the villain.
Yes, but also, I don't know. I think that the thing that disappointed me the most was the lack of continuity with Tony's panic attacks and how quickly that got resolved, because it is canonically something that in the comics Tony does struggle with, and it's part of his alcoholism, and I felt like it could have been used more.
Yeah.
But then again, I do also understand why they might not have wanted to put all of that on Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's things that are enjoyable about Iron Man 3, but to me, it's still a bat nuggie. Talking about other films that came out this year, Frozen, it ended up becoming the highest grossing animated film of all time, but it came out towards the end of 2013, so I'm sure it might show up on next year's list for 2014 as well.
Yeah.
It started a phenomenon. It was a huge, giant thing. Let It Go was, as you've illustrated before, became a huge giant thing that kids just loved, and I don't know, it broke a lot of conventions of Disney movies,
but it didn't. It wasn't the first. I've had this conversation a number of times with a friend of mine who because the first Disney movie who broke a lot of those conventions was Tangled, but Tangled did not do very well, but because it did decently, but because it was able to do decently, they took the risk with Frozen, which had better songs, but that's about the only thing it had catchier songs, which is about the only thing it has on Tangled, but therefore did a lot better. And I never thought much of it, to be honest. There were a number of things that didn't work out very well. The twist villain was poorly executed.
Oh, no, I loved that.
No, that was poorly executed.
That's a conversation of their day.
Yeah.
Bat cookie.
I'm giving it a bat noogie. I really didn't enjoy it.
Gravity.
Also, look, I'm sorry. A movie with that kind of budget should be able to have at least one person looking for a hair clipping through somebody's arm.
I don't know what you're talking about, but that's fine.
Okay, that's all right. The people who know.
Gravity, 7th highest grossing film of the year. Never saw it.
Heard good things about it, mostly because my brother-in-law is an astrophysicist.
Oh, I think it's impressive that a movie like Gravity is on a list of highest grossing films of the year.
Yeah.
It's more of a prestige, Oscar-y kind of movie, and it did really well. So
yeah,
I'll give it a bat cookie for that alone.
Yeah, I'll give it a bat cookie for that. And it helped Neil deGrasse Tyson to become more popular, which is nice.
Fast and the Furious 6 was the 8th highest grossing movie. I know you haven't seen any of it. This is one I haven't seen, so I'm just going to give it a bat noogie.
Yeah, definitely.
Oz the Great and Powerful, shockingly, was one of the highest grossing films of the year.
Really? That was not a good movie.
I know, that's why I'm surprised.
I saw it.
I did not.
I saw it because Zach Braff is the flying monkey in it or something like that.
Oh.
And I really liked Scrubs, and I was like, oh, cool. And yeah, no, it was awful.
You should note that in the top 10, there are 4 Disney movies this year. So we're starting to see more of Disney taking over.
Mm.
The 10th highest grossing film, Star Trek Into Darkness. Joss Whedon's, or not Joss Whedon,
J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams' second kick in the can at Star Trek.
I think the best one of the reboot.
Really? I've heard people don't like this one.
Really? I liked it.
I think everyone knew going into it that Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be Khan, and everyone was and they tried oh, it's not Khan, it's not Khan.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to that because it was obvious that he was going to be Khan, everybody knew, and it was okay, and it worked. It was a very different Khan, but he pulled it off quite well.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and
yeah,
I'll give it a bat cookie.
Oh, I give it a bat cookie for sure.
Thor: The Dark World finished 11th at the box office, so it too experienced a jump in box office gross because of Avengers.
I haven't seen it.
It's
and I don't think I will. Yeah,
bat noogie. The second Hobbit finished in 13th place, so it
Yeah, I was getting bad.
Yeah,
Bat noogie.
Bat noogie.
It was
The Wolverine finished 21st at the box office that year.
I went to see that in theaters.
I love
was
that
so
movie.
excited.
I love it.
But you understand, it is not that good.
It's
in
pretty
certain
good.
aspects, but
The ending, the final.
the ending is terrible.
It's not that bad.
No, it is.
And when you think of the whole spectrum of X-Men movies, it's in the better half for sure. Think of some of how bad some of these X-Men movies are, especially like the Wolverine one that came before it with Origins.
Yeah, but it's still in the bottom of the top. It's a very...
I give it a bad cookie.
I mean, I'm giving it a thin back cookie, but the problem with the ending being the bad part was that that's what I left the theater with. And I never rewatched it since because I had no desire to.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I remember there was, like... I do remember the beginning was good and I enjoyed it, but it ended so poorly that I was like, why?
Okay, well, we're allowed to disagree on things here. And then the only other movie for the year that's kind of noteworthy is G.I. Joe Retaliation. This was their attempt to somehow do a sequel, but also a soft reboot of the G.I. Joe movies.
Pretty hard reboot.
Yeah, because the first one, The Rise of Cobra, did not do very well. And
I would honestly recommend The Rise of Cobra as a so bad it's good movie.
Yeah, and so Retaliation, they basically they intentionally bring back Channing Tatum's character just so he can be killed off, and they kill off a bunch of the characters in the first film.
Bring The Rock.
Yeah, they bring The Rock. Snake Eyes thankfully survives, and so it follows a smaller ragtag bunch of Joes, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I've not seen it, but I mean, it can't be as bad as the first one.
It's way better.
Yeah.
Bad cookie.
All right, I'll give it a thin back cookie. The Rock is entertaining, if nothing else.
So looking at 2013 as a whole, we saw some changes happen. Call of Duty stopping the most popular video game. NCIS overtook football as the most watched TV show. We saw the start of streaming prestige shows. All kinds of different animes. Dragon Ball Z was making its resurgence. And as far as...
something we didn't really mention, though, is that Attack on Titan was on Netflix and was gaining ground on Netflix, because I distinctly remember when Netflix started having good anime on it, and that was like kind of when it was starting, because let's be honest, when Netflix started, the anime it was awful.
And things like Frozen and Iron Man 3 were big deals of the movies. So
yeah, Frozen was a thing.
So 2012 was certainly a year where like big highs and lows for TV shows ending, and now this was like the weird kind of transitionary period.
Yeah, so I feel like 2014, 2015 will be much more interesting, also with the MCU kind of ramping up and streaming becoming more of a thing.
So there we go. That's been our look at 2013. If you want to send us an email, recommend a topic for us to do after the Memory Lane series, please send us an email, because we have no mail. And we'll remind you, faithful Batjar listeners, how you can do that, how you can send us an email.
Yep, you can send us a question or idea via email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
the Bat Cookie Jar.
And we're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share our posts on Facebook and make sure to like our page, because we want everyone to join us inside the Bat Jar.
Or we'll do a Henry Cavill and snap your neck.
We can attempt that.
I'm just kidding. I won't do that to anybody. We love you guys. We're thankful for you listening. Please share us with your friends. Of course, we said we are on YouTube, so if you want to find us that way, that'd be great.
At 1.5 million followers, we will do a Let's Play video.
Oh, that'd be fun. Come back to the Batjar podcast next week when we look at the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
And I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
Barabasa llega en la familia por vía marítima.